going to cloak myself. So, and be right here enjoying everything. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us, and welcome everyone. My name is Faith Alpher, and I'm pleased to be your host and moderator for this evening with my very dear friend, Tony Hale. He's got the ridiculous accolades. We all love him. We have people coming in, literally, Tony, from all over the country.
Oh, that's fun.
And it's funny, no pressure. So
That's
I don't
right.
know, no pressure whatsoever.
I'm feeling the
So
pressure.
So I want to make sure we say thank you so much to Kimberly and also the UCR's theater, film, and digital production class. So this is technically a class where more people are joining in. And I want to see the Emmy Award winning Tony Hale. And we love you. And let's be honest, I had your accolades in front of me, but that's what happens when you leave them in the kitchen. So
We don't need them. We don't need them.
we're just going to keep on. We're just going to keep on keeping on. So Tony, in a little background, Tony and I went to grad school together on the East Coast, and we were in many shows together, and there was a lot of laughter and fun. But Tony was the type of person, out of all of our group, you would look at, you're like, he's got something special. He's going to do something special.
That kid's got a lot of trauma he's got to work out. That's what you got.
Trauma and special, trauma, drama, and
Right.
something special that is going to work out. Now, I believe after school, Tony, you graduated and you went to New York. A lot of people say they want to go to New York, but you actually went to New York. How was that transition, leaving school and going to New York? Did you start working right away?
Oh, no. I actually went on a trip with our school. If you remember, they would take people up to New York, and I went up, and I have dealt with anxiety in my life. And so new things in life are like really freaky. And so the fact that I went up and I just kind of fell in love with it was kind of a miracle in its own. But I didn't know anybody. I moved, I think 7 times in the first 6 months of living there. The very first show I did was Shakespeare in the Parking Lot, where we did Taming of the Shrew in a parking lot in the East Village.
Wow.
I had so many odd jobs. I would cater waiter. I would pass out flyers in Bryant Park just to make ends meet. And then I remember going to these things called Actors Connection, where you paid money to meet agents. And I went in and read copy for a commercial agent. And my type was described. She thought I had a good type, and that type was described as David Schwimmer, but not as good looking. And I was like, okay, bingo. And then she said, he's kind of like a type, like he's not all there. And I was like, I'll take it. And if you look at the characters I played, they're pretty much not all there also. But I started to kind of dabble in commercials, and I was there for 7 years in New York. But it took me, I started doing a lot of commercials, but it took me like 5 years to find an agent that represented me for TV and film, because and theater, because they couldn't see me beyond a commercial actor. Because one of the downfalls of this business, they kind of see you as something, and then crossing over into something else is a bit of a challenge. And then thankfully I found a manager, an agent that would send me out for other stuff. And that's where the audition for Arrested Development came around.
Yeah, but you kept going. You see, you said something so important, because a lot of people can't find agents and managers, and oh, it's been 2 years, it's been 3 years, oh, I'm just gonna give up. And how many people do we run into and say, oh, I used to act, oh, I want to act, but you kept, what made you keep going? Like you persevered.
That's a great question, because this is what I love to tell students when I talk to them. Whenever you move to a new place, whatever field you're going into, if it's acting or anything else, always, my advice is to always invest in community over career initially. Because my career, there's so much, you're pretty much signing up for a career of rejection. You're constantly rejected. And if you don't have a community that sees you for who you are and really gets to know you, and you can fall back on and see who you are. Did I just get cut off?
No, we're still here.
Oh, good. But if you don't find that community, the business is going to be too much and you're going to burn out. And so I was so grateful that I just found good friends, and I found people that, would tell me to press on. I would have a life outside the business. It's very easy to just make your life the business. And so for some reason, I invested in that foundation. That's what definitely gave me the longevity by far.
I like that, community over career. So as you students, as you're listening, make sure to build your community, because like Tony, you're going to graduate school.
Yeah.
You're going to be into the real life. I love that. So
and there's also, sorry to add this, but it's like,
no.
I feel like, especially in your guys' generation, there's well, not just your generation, there's already so much pressure in college to figure out what you want to do, to have an exact answer. It is, life does this. So you might be going this direction, something else comes and goes this direction. The fact that you don't know is fine. It's completely fine. And the challenge of your generation is there's so much technology that gets into comparison mode. We didn't, when Faith and I were younger, I had obvious jealousies and I would compare myself to somebody else who was maybe in a show, but I didn't have social media that was a constant tool that I could see what all of my fellow artists were doing, and it was so hard to not fall into that trap. And that is something you really got to watch, because you have your own path, but really fight against that comparison, because that is another thing that's poison.
It is, it is poison. You think about when you're driving on the freeway, it's not a straight line.
Yeah.
You're doing this and you're going to get to your destination of where you're going. And speaking about getting to your destination, was there ever a time when you were in New York where you felt like, I want to give up? Is this really worth it? Because for someone to assess and say, well, let me see, he's David Schwimmer, but not as cute. I mean, in your faith, that stuff, I mean, that's harsh.
It's harsh. It's harsh. And you also, it's not just that, you walk into a room and you see, because I was a quirky actor, you see 20 or 30 guys who look and act exactly like you. And I'm like, what am I bringing to the table that is setting me up? And it's like, you can really get into a brain space of, why am I here? This is absolute craziness. And I do go back to that foundation of people seeing me beyond a type, beyond a commodity. That was a huge thing. But I mean, it wasn't just back then. I've been doing this for over 25 years, and I'm still like, this is exhausting. I mean, even though I'm in the most uncertain career you could ever choose, I like a schedule. I like plans to work out. And it's constant uncertainty, so you're always, and another thing about our business, which Faith, we all know about as actors, in life, normally, you go on, 4 or 5 interviews or whatever, and then you have a job for however long, years, okay? We are on a job interview for years, and we're lucky if we get a gig for 4 or 5 months. So it's just the opposite. Our business is a job interview. So I don't even think a thick skin is like the right way to say it. It's more of just like, you have to have that portion of you that's like, I have to just keep going, because this one person I remember telling me, like, well, if you're not blonde and built like a brick wall, I can't use you. And I was like, none of that. I got a full dad bod and I'm not going to dye my hair, so it's like, it can really mess with you, and you just have to keep walking.
Wow. I love that. So how do you deal, or I should say, what do you do for caring for yourself, your mental health, your mind and your body, like constantly hearing that, we can always say these cliches like, well, rejection is protection. Okay, that's good. But when you win it, it's like.
Exactly. Well, I think one thing I did do in New York, which I was, again, very grateful for, a friend of mine, Kathy Krabowski, and I, did you know Kathy?
Yes. Wow. I haven't heard that name in years.
Yeah. Her and I started this group called The Haven, which was in New York. And it was a bunch of artists who we all had faith in. We all were people of faith. And one thing we would always do is, over Thanksgiving, we'd have a pie bake. And over Valentine's Day, we would do these service projects. One year we would make these like flower heart wreaths, and we would take them to this hospital with who house a lot of AIDS patients. And then for Thanksgiving, we would deliver all of these pies to a homeless shelter. And we would do all these things because when you are what you're selling, when I'm going out and I'm like, buy me, here's my headshot, here's my face, here's me, it is really hard to not have the attention constantly on yourself. And you have to make conscious choices to get your mind off of yourself and look at the bigger world. And so being in those shelters, being in those hospitals as a group, because I mean, if I'm honest, if I'm by myself, I would not necessarily make that choice a lot of times to go to a homeless shelter, but it's like doing it with a group as a community and doing it, it really rewired the brain and was a real caring tool for ourselves.
I love that because it goes back to, once again, community. We're developing a wonderful through line that I hear you saying, and students, as you listen, and also for us who were, you know, older, maybe in the business, maybe not, being a part of a community is everything. My mother used to say, if you are not giving, you're not living. So we can always give back, whether it's compliment to someone, whether it's serving someone, you can always give back. So Tony, I'm dying to ask you, let's talk a little bit about the obvious. I was going to go back to well, before we talk about that, let me take you back to when you were younger. Were you always funny? Because to us and to millions of people literally all over the world, you're just, oh, funny guy. Like, were you always funny when you were younger?
I think I was always needy. I always craved attention. I will say I grew up in the South, and sports were a religion. Football was a religion. I was not a part of that religion. I was not an athletic kid. And my parents just didn't really know what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with myself. And they found this little theater called Young Actors Theater. And it was a place where I felt seen. It was a place where I felt like I could be silly and that I wasn't going to be judged. I could get on stage and make people laugh. And I'm arts education, I get on a huge platform about this because even if you don't go into arts like you and I have, there are certain personalities like myself that need that environment to thrive. Other environments they don't thrive in. They need that environment to find themselves. And so having this theater, and I had a lot of family. My mom is an addict, and it was really, there's a lot of that psychology involved of like trying to find attention elsewhere. But that space was like, it was a genuine haven for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And you named your group.
Yeah. The Haven. Yeah.
In the Haven in New York. That's awesome. Do you remember where you were when you got the call to audition for Arrested Development? And was it always called that? Was that the name?
Good question. It was always called that. And I was in, oh dang, I don't remember where I got the call. But I remember I'd met my wife at the Haven. My wife was a makeup artist on SNL for 7 years. And we met, she came to the Haven and we started dating. And I just remember I was planning a wedding because we had been dating for about 1.5 years and we wanted to get married. And then this call came from actually a casting director that cast commercials, Marcia DeBonis. And that is another thing that I learned from this. Don't ever poo-poo jobs. Like I've done a lot of interesting, what some might call small jobs or whatever. You never know how the path is going to work in other paths. And this casting director of this commercial I did, she was the casting director for Arrested Development. She brought me in because the description was a guy who wasn't all there. And I came in, and at that time, guys, we didn't have the interwebs. So we would put ourselves on tape, and then they would send the tape across to the West Coast. And rarely would you get sent to the West Coast for a callback. But I got sent to the West Coast for a callback. I was freaking out. And I somehow, booked it. And then 10 days before I got married, the show got picked up. And I told my wife, Martella, I was like, I guess we're moving to LA. And so she left her job at SNL, which was a huge sacrifice. And we moved up to LA, and we've been here for 20 years.
Wow. I mean, just like that. What was the time frame from when you
Yeah,
got the call to, hey, we
sure.
want
We shot, I think I got the call for the audition in like maybe December. And
you?
so I auditioned for the holidays. And then I think probably January or February, I got the call for the callback. And then we shot the show in April.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I think they were having a hard time casting Will Arnett's character Job, and they kind of put us all in a room. And guys, I had never been on a studio lot. I had never had that amount of free food. Like I was just like everything was so overwhelming to me. You know, I was just living in like I was at the time, I'd been living in Harlem for about 7 years in a studio apartment. And I mean, I was living paycheck to paycheck, and I had never flown that nicely. Like I was like, this is crazy. And it was I had a lot of questions, you know, just to kind of, what do I do? And we were both, my wife and I, when we moved out, we were both like newly married, but I specifically did not know anything about the business. I didn't know what a manager was. I didn't know what a publicist was. I mean, I knew I'd heard of these things, but like, what is their role? You know, all that stuff.
So who was guiding you? Like when you moved to LA, who was guiding you?
You know, it's funny you asked that because not really anybody. And what that has led me to do is when I'm on a set, if there's somebody guest starring or somebody say, I get a lot of joy out of being that voice in somebody else's life of
Mhm.
like, hey, I know this is overwhelming. Like when people come on Veep, when they would come on Veep and they wouldn't, the dialogue was so fast, the choreography of the scene was so fast, ideas are being thrown around, we're improvising, and you could see this shock face. And I really got a kick out of just being like, hey, I know this is a lot, but this is how this is going to go. And it's all going to work out, but it's totally okay to be like overwhelmed right now. Cause that's what I needed. And I never had that. I love doing that for other people. I really do.
Wow. And honestly, Tony, that's why you're so successful and so kind.
Uh,
And when I got to give props to my son, because when we reunited, like I wish I would have had a camera with your reaction
I
when you
know.
saw me. So Tony and I haven't seen each other in many, many years. He's been a little
Many
busy,
years.
right? And I've been a little busy. But your reaction,
Yeah.
I wasn't too sure how. I was like, I think he remembers me. People said, "Do you know Tony
Yeah.
Hale?" It's like I don't want to name drop, and I'm like, yeah. And my son is like, "Do you think he could come to my class?" I'm like, "Pipe down, son. I don't know." And look at what you are and where you are right now. It's because of what you have invested in.
Oh, that's nice.
I mean,
Thank you for saying that, but it's also the power of relationships.
mm,
And I kind of go back to that because you and I were, you know, we're very young. We both didn't know what we were doing. And it's almost like trauma bonding. Like you're just kind of like, we got this, let's hang together. And you really get close and you never forget that.
no,
Like
and we were always
yeah, we were always
crying,
close. And
laughing.
we talked about this that night is in my business, I don't have a lot of friends with history. You know, I mean, it's like there's I do have friends, but you know, there's business acquaintances and a lot of relationships out here are kind of transactional. But friends with history, there's a lot of power to it. So these friends
Exactly.
that all of you guys have at school, please know that the foundation laid right now is something you're going to carry on for the rest of your life. You really are.
I love what Tony said. Don't lose touch with your friends and don't poo poo someone because you don't think that they can get you ahead. It is about relationships and it is about building. So, Tony, how do you deal with fame? Because
Mm,
you're the
a
type of
huge
character.
celebrity. Wait,
I mean, we all, you know, you play that role
mm,
that we all feel like we know you, but in reality,
mm.
people don't know you. So how do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
deal with fame? Like somebody coming up to you and shoving you, Buster, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like doing all that nonsense. You're like, do I
yeah,
need to be protected? I need to call
yeah.
911.
I actually really love that. I love talking about this, and this is why, is because I think fame, and especially now when there's just so many reality shows and the Kardashians, all that kind of stuff. I think fame is based in the desire to be known. And we look at fame as the ultimate being known, when in actuality, it's the exact opposite. Because if you take somebody who works, in Alabama at the mall, right? Anything that's said to them, given to them, any encouragement that's said to them, they freely receive that. There's no strings like questioning where their motives are. But you take someone like Brad Pitt, who lives on a compound somewhere in LA, anything said to him, encouraged to him, given to him, he is always questioning their motives. So I say that the person working at the mall is more known than Brad Pitt. But that's the exact opposite than what our world says, because it's always like, how many Twitter followers do you have? How many Instagram? That's not being known. That's celebrity, but that's not being known. And everybody's desire is to be known. So I pitch that if you're known by people who love you, and I'm a person of faith, so by God, that's all the known you need. But our society is constantly looking for that ultimate known, when actually I think they already have it. I know I turned into a little bit of like a platform, but
No, get on the platform and I'm gonna give you snaps. Get on it, baby. Snappy snap. Yes.
but I think that's very true.
Wow. Sheesh. How do I follow? I can't even.
But it's like, the thing is, but here, I'm saying that I'm also a person in the public eye. It's a daily choice for me to remind myself that, hey, I got the foundation. I'm known, I'm loved, I'm seen. When I'm like, I'll go back a little bit. When I was in New York, I was, whatever I was going through, I was always like, that sitcom's coming. That sitcom's coming. And then when I got Arrested Development, I remember going through what I would call a little bit of a crisis, because it didn't satisfy me the way I thought it was going to satisfy me. And what I realized, that if you're not practicing contentment where you are, you're not going to be content when you get what you want.
Mm.
And so I had my dream, guys. I had a sitcom. I was with one of the best casts ever. I was doing a job I wanted, and it still did not, because I'd given it so much weight that nothing could match what I'd given it. And so I really woke up to like, oh, I haven't been very present in my life. I spent my entire time in New York just like, that's coming, that's coming, that's coming, rather than looking around. I mean, yeah, New York was a great experience, but I didn't really look around. And I say practicing contentment because I don't think it comes easy. I think it's a discipline. And I think I had to look around and be like, whoa, I have this, I have this. And I wish, that's why I love talking to students. It's not easy. It does not come naturally. It's not a default. But as much as you can take deep breaths and look around you and really practice that discipline of contentment, then whatever happens just unfolds, rather than you giving it so much weight to match this thing in you. And I wrote a children's book years ago about it, called Archibald's Next Big Thing. And it's about a little chicken who gets a card in the mail that says, your big thing is here. And Archibald's like, where? So he goes on all these adventures. And every time he's on an adventure, he's like, I got to get to my next big thing. And then, so he goes to the next big thing. But then in the end, he realizes, oh, then this bee comes along. And the bee's like, you got to just be, man. You got to just be. And in the end, he realizes that the card is right, that your big thing is here. My big thing right now is talking to you guys. That's my big thing. My big thing is not somewhere else. And the more that I'm so jealous of you guys, because the more that you can wire that in your brain, that your big thing is right here, it's not coming, then I think whatever does unfold, there's a lot more joy to it rather than expectation. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, that it does make sense. Practicing contentment, it is a discipline.
it is
Because
a discipline.
naturally we're just like all over the place, but being content where you are, right where you are, knowing that you are on your way somewhere. But instead of, when I lived in an apartment for years, when we first got married, all I could do was talk about a house. Oh, and I can't wait till I move in. Can't wait till I buy a house. Can't wait till I buy a house. Blah, always, always, always. By the time I left the apartment and was in the house, it's like, well, it's kind of a little dusty in here. I go, wow, I just lost all of
Yeah.
that to get to the next thing. So I
Yeah.
had to learn contentment. Wow, I had to practice contentment. So let me ask you this. If you weren't an actor, and I know we're gonna grab some questions from the
Oh yeah, I
students.
love it. Let me turn a light on here because it's starting to get
Yeah.
starting to get dark over
I
here.
don't want to
Sorry.
say anything. I'm like, Tony's disappearing. But
There we go. Okay, here we go. There we go.
so if you weren't acting, what will you be doing if you weren't an actor?
Oh, now I'm backlit. Guys, what's going on? Not good. Not good.
Only an actor would
This
say
is why I know
backlit.
a little too much about lighting. That's probably not good either. Oh, well, who cares? I would, I could see myself doing ministry. I could see myself either doing ministry or social work because I really, one of the big joys that I get from being on sets, I do love my work. I love doing characters. I love all that stuff. But I really love getting to know people. I love hearing about their lives. This is a cutthroat business, and just kind of seeing people, that's like, I get a big kick out of that. Yeah.
That's okay. Okay, that's good. And honestly, Tony, listening to you, you're doing that. You're a man of faith, like you said. You're
Yeah.
doing that. I'm sure the lives that you have spoken into people is phenomenal, and I know that for a fact. And also, students, if you want to ask questions, make sure you, however we do it, raise your hand or put it in the chat. And
Oh
we
yeah,
can
I think they have little
oh,
hands that they hold up.
yes, we
I
do have
love.
little hands. All right, we have a little hand from someone whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce.